Thank you for joining us for ALD's series Career Conversations. So last year we changed our tagline to taking you from first year to career. So this series looks to do that. It looks to explore the path between your first year in college to your career in education. So we have fantastic alumni that are participating, like Jamie today, and we're excited to see students on the call. And we hope you came with questions, or will feel free to ask some at the end. We'll start with introductions. Eileen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Eileen Merberg. I'm Executive Director of Alpha Lambda Delta here in the headquarters in Rochester, New York. Thanks for coming. Thank you, Jamie, for helping our program tonight.
And I'm Trish Maxwell. I'm the Director of Communications. I work with Eileen in the national office. And I'd like to introduce our speakers. So Jamie Vescio was inducted into ALD in 2014 at Transylvania University. She was a recipient of the Dr. Mike Nichols Fellowship in 2017 and was also a Joanne J. Tro Undergraduate Scholarship winner in 2015. She earned her undergraduate degrees in French and anthropology and went on to Vanderbilt University to earn her master's in education in elementary education. She's currently a middle school French and elementary mathematics instructor for the School of Creative and Performing Arts in Lexington, Kentucky. So hi, Jamie, welcome. We're going to get started with just a few kind of easy questions to break the ice. So if you could only eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I thought long and hard about this one. I think, so I lived in France for a year, and the one thing that I missed there the most was bagels, which is weird because, France is known for its baguettes. They have amazing bread, but something about bagels I just really missed. I think they're very versatile food and I love bread. So definitely bagels.
I'm with you on that one.
I know. Well, you all are in New York, so you have the most.
Upstate, right? But we do get good bagels.
Yes.
Okay, so we were talking about travel a little bit earlier. If you won an all expense paid 7-day vacation, where would you go? Anywhere in the world? And we'll just pretend that we're past COVID and pandemic and restrictions. You can go anywhere you want. Where would you go?
Yeah. Well, I think I would probably go back to France actually and visit some of the people who I was close with while I lived there. I taught there in a high school for a year. And so I would love to go back and see the family that they were kind of my host family there. And I had planned to go there probably this summer, but that's obviously not going to happen. So hopefully in the next summer or two, I'll be able to visit them again.
This could be
eat bagels.
Yeah, right. And eat bagels. We'll explore that teaching in another country and that would be a good, I think, of interest to our participants today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jamie, did you always want to be a teacher, or did you have another career in mind when you were younger?
No, the first job that I wanted when I was younger was to be a screenplay writer, actually. The school that I'm teaching at now is a creative and performing arts school, which you probably picked up from the name. And I actually attended this school as a student where I was a creative writing major. And so for 4th through 12th grade, students at our school have a major that they specialize in and get to practice that and perform during their time here. So as a creative writing major, I wanted to do anything with writing, but specifically I was really interested in writing for movies. So that was my first job aspiration or career aspiration, but that definitely changed a lot into high school and then into college. And I really didn't decide to be a teacher until probably my junior or senior year at Transy.
Great. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your undergraduate experience at Transy, as it's known as, and your involvement with Alpha Lambda Delta. Can you say a little bit about what role you did play? Were you involved in the chapter? What sort of motivated you to even join when you were invited? And can you be specific about any skills you feel you gained from your experience with the chapter?
Yeah, well, I think I initially joined for the recognition. I mean, I didn't know, to be honest, a whole lot about Alpha Lambda Delta before joining. And so when I was kind of invited to or was given the opportunity to join, it sounded, like something interesting to do as a first year who's still trying to figure out lots of things, like your major or potential career. So I originally joined it probably for that reason, but what I gained from it was Transy is a very small campus, so you would think it'd be easy to meet people who are similar to you or like-minded or have similar interests. But I think just like any college campus, I still felt a little bit lost for the majority of my first year, both personally, but also just academically, not really sure what direction I wanted to go in. And so the biggest thing I gained from joining was just being around a community of students who were also figuring out that same question, but were also doing very well academically and could give me the motivation to explore different options, and to still challenge myself and to be around people who are also challenging themselves in their coursework. So I think after I never had a leadership role with Alpha Lambda Delta, but our leaders who were kind of in charge of our chapter did a great job of advertising scholarship opportunities to the general members, and I really took advantage of those to help pursue things that I wasn't sure I wanted to do as a career, but wanted to kind of get my feet wet with it. And so I used a lot of the scholarship opportunities to explore internships or summer study abroad options, that were kind of in the realm of things I was interested in doing, but wasn't quite sure if I wanted to pursue yet. So it was invaluable in being able to fund some of those opportunities. And then those opportunities helped me later decide what I wanted to go into as a career.
And a great example that, a lot of times I get the question of, well, don't only officers win scholarships? And I always say, no, not if you're engaged and, involved in the process. So you're a great example, Jamie. Let's talk a little bit about your major and your academic experiences and how they helped prepare you for a degree in teaching.
Well, I always knew I wanted to major in French, but I always kind of thought of it as a secondary major. I just knew I liked the language, but I never thought it would turn into a career. So that major, I kind of knew going into college I wanted to do just to continue with my language development. But the anthropology I picked up after studying abroad in Tanzania the summer after my first year, which was the experience that I was able to do because of one of the scholarships that I got from Alpha Lambda Delta. And so after that experience studying abroad, I decided to pick up the anthropology major, which went really well with my French major and just my overall interest in studying different cultures. But I think I initially went into it with this interest in cultural studies, but it eventually turned into an interest in social justice as well. And so that led into kind of thinking about where I might want to take those two majors. And because Transy is a liberal arts school, I was also taking all sorts of classes in different areas and eventually kind of had to take an education class for a requirement and thought that it was just a perfect fit for all of my different interests in social justice. And then putting that kind of in the realm of working with kids was a really big interest of mine. So that led to, at that point, it was kind of too late to declare any sort of education major or to become a certified teacher at Transy. So that led to my decision to become a teacher through a master's program where I both got my master's and my certification to teach. So that was kind of the roundabout way of eventually getting to where I am. But I'm really happy that I took that route because I think it's informed a lot of my teaching practices, the fact that I had the anthropology and the French background.
And can I ask, how long was your master's program since you did it kind of all at that point?
Yes, it was a year, but it was a busy year. I think actually the year before I did my program at Vanderbilt, the master's program. It had initially been a 1.5 year long program or a 2 year program. But the 1.5 year timeline doesn't work super well for teachers because that would have you finish in January, and it's kind of hard to find teaching jobs in the middle of the school year. So they eventually shortened it to a 1 year-long program, but I started in the summer and ended in the summer. So it was kind of 4 semesters back to back, essentially.
Sounds intense.
It was, but it was a good experience.
Yeah, good. So you've touched a little bit on this already, but so if there's anything more to add, your path again from first year to career, as we say, and what sort of helped you along the way. You've mentioned scholarships, and internships, but talk about the internships and jobs you had, research you did. I think with the angle of, we're assuming the students who are participating and watching right now or will watch the recording are undergraduate students still, maybe sophomores, maybe juniors, maybe some are seniors. What should they be looking at and looking to do that would help them become teachers, and talk about what helped you?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I feel like every experience that I had during my undergraduate experience, a lot of those experiences made me realize what I didn't want to do, but I'm so thankful that I did them, because I think oftentimes people don't realize what they don't want to do until they have that as a job. And then you kind of feel maybe a little stuck in that job or not sure where to go from there. So I'm so thankful that I took advantage of experiences very early on during my undergraduate experience, because it was almost like with each experience, I became more and more aware of things that I did want to do or definitely didn't want to do. So as a transy student on campus, I was in a lot of organizations, like I was a tour guide and an overnight host. And I also was we had a first year ambassador program where I helped a professor teach a class for first years, just about overall acclimation to our campus and getting used to college. So those experiences helped me realize that I really liked being in kind of an education role. But again, I don't think that had clicked quite yet. I just knew that I liked those clubs and organizations that I was a part of. But then early on in my experience, I was also part of a lot of clubs that I didn't enjoy as much. So at first I thought maybe I might want to go into the field of medicine. And so I was in a pre-health club. I'm glad that I joined it because I realized I didn't want to do that. But I think that's one thing that I would definitely recommend early on, is just kind of dipping your feet into lots of different things, because I feel like that's the best way to figure out what works and doesn't work for you. So that was kind of the transy end of my involvement on campus. And then each summer I really tried to focus on a certain area as well. So my first summer I studied abroad in Tanzania, and that was a global health and public health study abroad program. So the classes I was taking were in those areas. Again, I was kind of thinking at the time I might want to go into medicine or maybe into public health, but realized I enjoyed more of the cultural studies that we did with that program. And so I kind of put the X on medicine, but opened the door for anthropology. And then the summer after that, I did a research program at Yale that had been kind of a long-standing program between Transy, the college I went to, and Yale, where Yale would basically accept a couple students from our school each summer for this research program that they do. And it was specifically in bioethics, but that's a really broad field. So I was still kind of getting to explore some of these questions I was interested in from anthropology and from my kind of public health background, but was able to do that around some really incredible people, and learn from them through different seminars and research studies that we were doing there. And so then my final summer after my junior year was when I finally decided I thought I wanted to go into education. And so I did a summer program for Teach for America. where I was helping people who were going in to Teach for America get prepared in their classrooms and things like that. And that definitely solidified my decision to go into education, but it also informed me that I didn't want to do Teach for America and that I wanted to pursue a graduate degree and become certified that way as opposed to Teach for America, because it was a really tough organization. I think you basically learn how to be a teacher over one summer. And so I felt like that I wanted kind of a longer experience to do that. So that was what led to my decision to do graduate studies instead.
Great. And so a couple things, quick follow-up. We've done a lot of these career conversations. It's a recurring theme. So you're right on about getting as many experiences as you can to eliminate the things that you realize you don't want to do. So that's we hear that a lot. So it's a great advice to get the experience just to show you what you don't want to do. This might be a good time to talk a little bit about how you got this teaching gig in France. You know, how do you recommend that? And I mean, not everybody can do that, obviously. You know, how did you come upon that? How did you make that happen to actually teach in France?
Yes, well, I hadn't planned on it. And this is probably another thing which goes along with the advice I kind of gave about doing lots of things to figure out what you don't want to do, is also taking advantage of things that you never thought you would do, but that pique your interest. So I never thought I would teach in France. I thought after I did my master's program, I would just go straight into the classroom here in the US. But it only took a few months into my master's program to realize how much I missed French and speaking French, because I had done that for my entire college career as a French major. And so it was only about 2 months into the program where I started looking into the Fulbright program. I had heard about it, obviously, on Transy's campus. A lot of people had done it before and had obviously held it in a very high regard, but I never thought it was something I would be able to do or was even really qualified to do. So I kind of did about a month of reflection, because it was a big process for applying, and just really thought about whether or not it was something I wanted to take on, and obviously knew it was going to be a big commitment moving over there. But I kind of just thought, why not? So I ended up just applying, and it was a very long process, but found out about the same time where I would have also been applying to kind of regular classroom jobs. And so once I found out about that, I kind of, just felt like I couldn't turn it down. And so ended up doing that right after I finished my master's program. And I'm so happy that I did, because it gave me the chance to kind of breathe for a year, because it was the Fulbright teaching position is an assistant teaching position. So you're not the full on classroom teacher. So I felt like I got a great year of just being able to try things out as a teacher before having my own classroom when I came back to the US.
Great, thanks.
That's awesome. Did you have any formal or informal mentors? And, if so, how did you find them, and, how did they contribute? If not, do you think it matters for teaching?
Yes, I definitely had mentors, and pretty much all of them were my professors. I had a wonderful anthropology professor who I became very close with, and then also a wonderful education professor at Transy. And neither one of them were my official mentors, but they were just people I'd really connected with in the classroom, and who really put a lot into me as well. And so I valued that a lot. And I think having a professor as a mentor was something that worked really well for me, because although they weren't teachers in a public school classroom, they were still teachers in the academic realm or in the college realm. And so they were really able to give me a lot of advice about their own paths, what it was like for them as teachers. And also knowing that I wanted to go to graduate school, they had gone through that before in their own fields, especially my professor of education. She had been a teacher and then went to grad school. So she was following a very similar path to me. And so they gave me a lot of advice about schools to look for graduate programs. And then one of the biggest things that they did was they would read over a lot of my applications to places or my personal statements to graduate schools. And I think it was great to have them because they were in the position basically that of the people who would be reading my applications. They were professors themselves. And so I felt like I could trust them and they knew, what I would need to hopefully be successful in some of my applications and things like that. So I found my professors to be great mentors, but that was also a big part of my campus specifically because it is so small, as I think professors were very kind of obvious mentors for a lot of us on my campus. So I would definitely recommend professors if that's a possibility at your school. I know lots of schools have hundreds of students in their classes, which I cannot relate to. But that was a big plus for me on my campus.
Great. So maybe just one more question from us, and then for our participants today, if you have any, again, be ready to please feel free to turn your cameras on and unmute and or type in chat any questions you have for Jamie, but just sort of maybe a general overall advice you might give. So again, we've got undergraduate students, they're maybe involved in ALD, they might not be in their chapter. But what is some general advice, and maybe sort of add in there, are there things you wish you had done as an undergraduate that maybe you didn't, and now looking back in retrospect, you wish you had that might be helpful to our students?
Yeah, I think looking back, I feel like I'm very happy that I did really go after lots of different things during my undergraduate experience, specifically things outside of my campus, like the summer study abroad program and the research programs that I did. But in some aspects, I wish I had balanced that a little bit more with just taking a deep breath and not feeling the need to have every single thing figured out as an undergraduate student. Like I said, the best experiences that I had and the ones that led me to what I'm doing now were the experiences I never thought I would be doing my first year, because my first year I was so rigid about I have to do these clubs, I have to be in these organizations, I have to do this program over the summer. And the more that I allowed myself to say no to some things and yes to other things that I were not originally in my plan, the more I figured out what was going to make me happy and what I wanted to pursue leaving Transy's campus. So I think my biggest advice would just be to be open to things that you may not think you want to do now, and to be willing to try those things out, because the best time to try them out is when there isn't the pressure of it being your career or your job yet, because it's easier to say yes and no to things, I think.
I do have one that came in. I don't think you can see it. It says, can you talk about how COVID has impacted the profession, specifically how it might for the future?
That's a really good question. So presently, I teach in Lexington, Kentucky, and both my district and the district in Louisville, Kentucky, were the two biggest districts, have been closed totally virtual this entire school year up until this week. So this week is the first week that we've welcomed elementary students, and then next week we will start welcoming some middle school students and then eventually some high school students. So in many ways, I have been thankful that I am a newer teacher during this time, because I didn't have anything to rely on before that I was suddenly trying to figure out how on earth I would now teach that material online. Basically, everyone this year is starting from a totally equal playing field, I would say. I know most times, or most of the time with teaching, it's the first year teachers who are the most stressed out, or the younger teachers who are the most stressed out because they're just figuring out how on earth to survive, or what works best in their classroom without much experience yet. But this year I've felt, I think, a lot more confident in myself because I've felt really strong about my technology use, and because I've grown up with that basically in the classroom, and I've felt like I've been able to kind of adjust to it fairly easily, but it took a while in the beginning. So with online learning, I think the biggest challenge has been knowing when, or just finding my own boundaries and also trying to respect the kids' boundaries. I think it's really hard to be on Zoom all day long. And so that's been the biggest challenge, is trying to figure out, okay, what do we need to do together and what can I let you do on your own so that you're not staring at the computer screen all day on Zoom. As we move into in-person right now, I think my biggest challenge I'm trying to figure out is how to manage my kids who are in person and my students who are choosing to stay at home, because I definitely don't want to leave those kids out, even though the majority of my kids will be in person. But I think the thing I've learned the most this year is to, again, just kind of calm down a little bit. I think before I am someone who's a perfectionist, or has a perfectionist mentality, but I've really had to kind of let go of that this year and just kind of remember the bigger picture, which I think is something that a lot of people learn quick as teachers. Is there are some things that you just have to, let go of and just remember the bigger picture, which is that students want to have just memorable learning experiences, and the little details that you can't control are nothing to get worked up over, especially right now, because people are dealing with really big issues right now at home and in the classroom.
What if somebody, this is might be a silly question, but are there careers one can have as an undergraduate education major that's not teaching? Does everybody have to go into teaching? What if you realize you don't want to teach?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of people I knew who studied education who did not necessarily go into teaching. I know that it has been done, and it's definitely a possibility. One thing with Kentucky that is required of teachers is that you do eventually get a master's degree. And that not only, I think, makes you a better teacher, but a lot of times teachers will get degrees that are not specifically in teaching, like in being a classroom teacher, but they will go on to get degrees in being an education specialist, or a librarian, or a media specialist, something like that. And I think oftentimes I've seen a lot of teachers move into different areas that are related to education, but no longer in the classroom. So one thing I'm considering if I want to go on to get another degree would be potentially an education specialist degree, which would be basically teaching adults how to teach. So you'd become kind of a master in whatever field it is or content area that you're interested in. And then you would be helping other teachers learn how to teach students that content material. So that's something I'm interested in a ways down the road after I feel more comfortable as a teacher, but certainly a possibility for people who teach in the classroom for a little bit and maybe realize they want to do something different.
Yeah, and are there certifications and or professional organizations that you would recommend for these students?
Yes, there is a National Education Honorary Society. I'm sure I would have joined it if I were an undergraduate education major, and I can't think of the name off the top of my head. But as a graduate level student, it wasn't advertised a whole lot to us, so I didn't have the opportunity really to join. But there is that professional organization. In terms of certifications, that's another thing that I think is kind of difficult to figure out what it is you want to focus on as a teacher. I've been really lucky in that my master's program was for elementary education. So I became certified first as a K through 5 teacher. And then later, this position came open to be a French teacher, but I didn't have a French certification. But because I had the French background as an undergraduate major, I was able to basically just take a couple of tests and become certified that way. So that's something that I would consider as well, is if you're not quite sure what you want to teach, I think the safest bet is to go with what you're the content area you're the most interested in, but also know that that's not necessarily going to close complete doors to other options down the road. I'm someone who switched basically from being an elementary teacher, K through 5 teacher, to now teaching middle school French, which again, I didn't think I'd be doing. So
along the lines of certification, another question in the chat: to what extent do you get to choose what grade level you teach within your certification, or do you really not have a say?
yeah, great question. I think it probably depends on what school district you're applying to, but in my own experience with all of the school districts I applied to when I was first looking for jobs, you basically apply to the district. So you're not, unless you're going into the private school realm. With public schools, you're often not applying to the school itself. You are applying to the district. And so there's often a kind of central server that application server that you're going to, and they will post all job openings for their entire district. So for example, in my situation, when I was originally looking for jobs, I was interested in 4th or 5th grade. And so I looked at school districts that had 4th and 5th grade job openings and just kind of checked all of the openings that they had for that grade level. In other situations, though, like this past year, when I switched to a different school, there was a new school that was opening, and so they basically had all grade levels available for teaching. And so when it came down to deciding if I wanted to apply there, I reached out to the principal to ask her, is there a grade level you think I would be a good fit for? And so there are some situations where it's more just what's available is probably the grade level you would end up teaching. But also the principal at each school has some decision as well as to where they might place you.
Great. Well, I think that is all our questions that we've had. And so thank you to the students who've come and who might be watching in the future. But most of all, thank you, Jamie, for your time tonight, your great words of wisdom and sharing your experiences. I think is really helpful for those pursuing degrees in education.